Magical. It's not a word that I've often used to describe sewing, yet when I saw the project Serged and Sewn by my guest, it was the first word that came to mind. I'd like you to meet Pam Maschey, a serger expert who will show us how to transform the basic serger stitches into something mesmerizing. Pam, let's start with the basic stitch, the overlock stitch.
Well, thanks, Nancy. And today we're going to start with the basic overlock stitch. And that basic overlock stitch is used for seaming today. And today we're going to kick it up a notch by using it on the outside. I've brought this inside seam to the outside to create the woven section on the table runner. The technique is called whimsical weaving, and you don't need to use fairy dust to make this creation.
Magical serger techniques, that's what's coming up next on Sewing with Nancy.
Sewing with Nancy, TV's longest airing sewing and quilting program with Nancy Zieman, is made possible by Baby Lock, a complete line of sewing, quilting, and embroidery machines and sergers. Baby Lock, for the love of sewing. Madeira, specializing in embroidery, quilting, and special effect threads, because creativity is never black and white. Koala Sewing Cabinets, hand-built in the USA by American craftsmen, customized for you. Clover, makers of sewing, knitting, quilting, and embroidery products for over 25 years. Experience the Clover difference. Amazing designs and Class A needles.
Before showing you the magical techniques that a serger can do, Pam and I would like to review the basic stitch, how it's formed, and the variety of changes that you can make to this stitch. Now, an overlock stitch you'll find on sweatshirts and t-shirts. That's how the seams are created. And a 4-thread stitch, you'll have 2 needles and a looper, upper looper, and a lower looper. You'll see what this means in a few minutes, and then you can remove 1 needle and then have a 3-thread stitch. Now Pam is going to show you the blade in the serger, because the serge seam is created by trimming off the seam allowance, stitching the seam, and overlocking the edge at the same time. And the blades are in the inner mechanism.
Yes, they are, Nancy. So here we have the blade, which is going to be trimming your fabric away. And then on the inside, we have these 2 loopers, which are going to act like knitting needles, and they go over the edge of your fabric. So let me just run this and show you how it's going to be stitching. And you can see how those 2 loopers interact with each other, exchanging the threads.
So you can use heavier threads in the loopers because these threads do not pierce the fabric. One goes on top, upper looper, lower looper goes on the under, and they're connected at the side. Here's a close-up of how that basic serge seam is created. You can see the fabric, extra fabric of the seam allowance is trimmed off, and the seam is stitched and overcast at once. But if you just use the overlock stitch to serge a sweatshirt or a t-shirt, you're kind of missing
the boat.
The boat, yes, absolutely. And you saw earlier one of our magical techniques was the whimsical weaving section. And here you can see that we, instead of using a 4-thread stitch, we're just using the needle, the right needle, and the loopers. And we have heavy thread in this area. Now, Pam, you have your machine set up with specifics for thread.
Yes, we do. We have the decorative threads in both our upper and lower loopers, and as you mentioned, those threads do not go through the needle, and they are going to be crossing over the edge of our fabric. And you can again use either your left or right needle, depending upon the width of the stitch that you're wanting.
Now, if you're going to create the whimsical weaving, then you have to start with your fabric, cut some squares.
Correct.
And the squares, to give it a little bit extra support, we've added interfacing, just a fusible interfacing, and then place it on the cutting board and make some
wavy cuts.
Yes.
And just take your rotary cutter and just cut any shape that you're wanting.
So it's just a quick cut, and so they're stacked, and then the serging is done on all inner seams. You don't have to serge the outer edges because those edges will be enclosed in the seam allowance.
Correct.
Now some hints as far as just basic overlock stitching.
Okay, well certainly. When we stitch, first of all, we do want to always trim a little bit of our fabric edge away. So let me just close up the doors and show you how we're going to be stitching. When we place our fabric in front of the presser foot, we have these nice markings that will show us where the needles are going to penetrate the fabric. And then as we serge, trimming away always a little bit, you're going to end up with your stitching always being right on the very edge of the fabric and eliminating any type of gaps.
And if you had whiskers of the fabric, I like to thread whiskers, you get rid of those.
Exactly. It trims all of those little raw edges or rough edges away as we stitch. Now after we have this stitched, again as you mentioned and as you see, we have stitched on both sides of our fabric, and you end up with this lovely stitch right along the edge, making it very decorative.
So it doesn't take too long just to serge those edges and all the inner edges, and then you can do some weaving.
Right.
If you did weaving when you were making pot holders, depends
that's right.
what vintage you are, but I made plenty of pot holders for Christmas gifts as a little child. This is kind of the same thing. Lay one color down that you can see all the edges of the plum color have been serged vertically, and then the horizontal rows would come next. And let me just unpin this. Here, I'm just getting my next layer, and you find the matching strip, and then instead of going over and under, you alternate the strips over and under one row and under and over the second row, and you just keep snugging these together. And this is not, except I don't know how to weave. Here we go. We'll try this once more. And a little easier to do when you're on a flatter surface, and you can get the idea of this. Then after doing the weaving, you can press it, might do a little pressing, and then it can incorporate it in part of the table runners we have here. And this is a whimsical weave. No magic wand is needed for the next serge or embellishment. The table runner featured earlier has another magical serger technique. Spellbinding ribbon is created with a wide flat lock stitch, a decorative thread, and a unique ribbon insertion method. It's an ideal accent for home decor. Well, we came up with some kind of crazy names for these serger techniques, but spellbinding ribbon really means that we have inserted ribbon through a stitch and then put ribbon around the stitch for another option, or even added knots. It's an embellishment, it's creative, and Pam, a lovely table runner.
Thank you, and it really gives it a unique look for any type of home decor project, whether it's holiday or everyday use.
Now the flat lock stitch, we're going to give you the basics of that. It's kind of different as far as, it's not for seaming, it was mainly designed for decorative areas or putting on flat ribbing. As you can see, what you'll soon see is that we'll serge on a fold and then flatten out the fabric. You get two options. You get two for the price of one with this. You get a ladder stitch, which the needle thread shows, or a looper stitch where the looper thread shows. And we're only using two threads in this instance, a 2-thread flat lock. It's going to be wide. We're going to use the left needle, and then we're also going to use the lower looper. So only 2 threads. And Pam, there's some setups that are changes.
Correct, Nancy. And when we do this setup, it is important that we block our upper looper position. We trick the machine in thinking that there is actually thread to push up to the needle again in order to form that stitch. So here we can see that we've used the heavier thread, and we're working with a 30 weight thread so we can see the decorative stitches come through.
Now 30 weight thread, I have to admit, when I first was learning about thread weight, I thought that would be heavy, or excuse me, I said that wrong. It is heavier than most threads, but the lower the number, the heavier the thread.
The thread. That's right.
So if you had an 80 weight thread, it would be very fine.
Very thin.
So we have a 30 weight thread in both the lower looper and the left needle. And let me just show you how the flat lock stitch is formed. You would fold the fabric. If you'd like the chain looper to show, you fold the fabric, and then here you can see a close-up of that I'm guiding it underneath the presser foot, away from the blade area. You could even lock the blade if you'd like, and so that the loops go over the fold. And then after that has been stitched, then the loops are on the edge, and then you just flatten out the look. Just flatten it out.
And Nancy, it's important that when you're working with heavier fabrics that you leave more of the loops hanging off the edge so that you can flatten it.
Now you would do the same thing if you'd like the ladder stitch to show. to sew, instead of sewing on the right side of the fabric, sew on the wrong side of the fabric. And you do the same technique I just showed you. And here again is the loops are off the side of the fabric. But when I flatten it out to the right side, here you can see the ladder stitch. So that in itself is a decorative stitch. So why don't you do a decorative stitch with the heavier weight thread on your fabric?
All right, so we're going to close up our machine here, and we're going to be placing wrong sides together. The back side of our fabric, wrong sides together, simply stitching on the fold. And you can lock your cutting blade if you would like to, ensure that you don't trim that edge of your fabric. But it really doesn't matter, even if you do trim a little bit of that edge. So let's simply just stitch right down the edge of our fabric. And as you can see, there are some of those loops hanging off the edge. And then we'll just simply slide the stitches apart, which again makes it lay completely flat.
And that heavier thread did fill up more of the space than the lighter weight thread that I was working with.
That's right. And depending upon if you're wanting to work with even a heavier weight thread, place it in your looper for a more filled edge.
And now you're going to weave.
Yes, and now to create that great technique on our table runner, we simply thread a needle, a large-eyed needle with heavy yarn, and we're going to thread through the stitching that we've just created. So you can select either 2 or 3 threads that you're going to be going over, pull this through, and you end up with a great looking technique depending upon the kind of yarn you're using.
And the side-to-side weaving is equally as easy.
Side-to-side weaving, after we have this initial line of yarn placed, we're then just simply going to go from, again, side to side and crisscrossing the yarn under the thread or the yarn that we've already put in place.
Spellbinding ribbing, it's another great magical serger technique. Almost as fast as you can say abracadabra, you can turn rolled edge stitching into magical diamond tucks. The yoke on this precious dress is definitely the focal point of the outfit. The transformation comes into play when you connect rolls of rolled edge stitching in an alternating fashion and then add a touch of sparkle. Most of us think of a rolled edge perhaps on a napkin edge or an edge on a ruffle of a blouse, and that's how it's used often in industry. And you'll see edges such as this. I have the gold edge with heavier thread in the upper looper, and this stitch, which I'll show you in just a few minutes, is just with all threads of the same color. The upper looper wraps around the edge to finish the edge. The stitch length is short, the width is narrow. It's a rabble-proof seam. So the setting for this, you'll check your owner's manual, but the setting I'm going to be using will be 3 threads. I have the right needle, and the cone represents the right needle, and the upper looper and the lower looper. And Pam, why don't you show them the inner mechanisms, the changes that are needed there?
Sure, we will. Again, we're going to be using both the upper and lower looper, again with decorative threads. Kind of a continuing theme here. We're working again with decorative threads, but this time a lighter weight rayon thread is going to be used. We use again the upper and lower looper, and we're going to adjust our stitch length and width. By turning that stitch width and length to a very narrow setting, we get that very beautiful narrow stitch.
And you'll have to check your owner's manual. I make constant reference to that because there are many changes you can make. It's to make sure that you may have to change a foot perhaps, but maybe not. So when you serge, the basic serging stitch, here I'm going to just serge this for you, and you can see that it trims off some of the edges. It sews a little slower because you're having a lot of thread concentration, and then you just simply have a great stitch when you're done. Great napkin stitch. I have lots of hem napkins, but it's not time to work with napkins. It's time to do the magical part of this program. And the diamond tucks, we have columns and columns of diamond tucks stitched on the lengthwise grain, and then you'll see the little magic to connect the rows.
Okay, and we're going to start by just simply folding our fabric. You are stitching on the raw edge to create these beautiful tucks. We're going to be stitching on the folded edge of our fabric. Simply fold your fabric wrong sides together. We've already stitched 1 row, and we're going to be placing the outside row right on the edge of our presser foot. As we stitch, even if it trims away some of our fabric, we're going to be okay because each row is going to be perfectly aligned with the edge of the presser foot.
And the fabric, the edge is so tight that you don't have to worry about those cut edges.
Correct, correct. And if we're wanting to add fabric, if we fill this fabric completely to add on, all we need to do is place again wrong sides together and continue stitching, and you can make it as large as you need.
So row after row, we're going to be adding columns, and on this sample we have many columns stitched. And to create the tucks, you'll see some markings, and we've used chalk. And let me find my little ruler. Here we go, hiding underneath here. We made ruler marks, and you can decide, but ours are 1 inch apart. 1 inch apart, in chalk lines on the front of the fabric. That chalk will come off later. Then, considering the serged edges are row columns, we're going to sew together rows. So the first row, we're going to make column 1 and column 2. And I'm just going to pin these down. And then column 3 and 4 would be tacked together, and you'll see that in a minute. But then the second row will be column, you can figure this out, this would be 2 and 3 would go together. And then 4 and 5 would go together. And you can see how the diamonds would be created. But to tack this together, here's a close-up. At the regular sewing machine, I'm using the button stitch setting. It's like a bar tack, but it's meant to sew on a button, and it tacks just a little width and automatically knots the thread at the end. And you just tack and tack and tack at all of these intersections that we talked about. And then on our final little dress, we have added some extra sparkle by putting a pearl or a crystal at each of that intersection. It's magical. There's one more card up Pam's sleeve when it comes to rolled edge techniques. It's wild card trim. Instead of serging on fabric, the substitute is fishing line. The results, hands down, a winner. The throw that you just saw has this lovely accent on it, and it really has a look of expensive trim. We have used it in combination with some braid, but the edges have been serged, and as we mentioned, the secret is fishing line and a presser foot, an accessory foot. Now you can either use a beading foot or an elastic foot, and I'll show you both. If you want to know, this is 14 weight fishing line, just in case you'd like to know. And we have threaded this through the beading channel of the foot, and you would hold the fishing line taut to serge over it. And it has a channel that it just goes right in. Now the foot that Pam will be using is an elastic foot, and there happens to be a very small opening where the fishing line can go through, and you can be the serging. So that's what Pam has set up, plus decorative thread, Pam.
Correct. Again, we're using the decorative thread, and we're going to be threading both our upper and lower looper with those decorative threads. So we just simply thread those loopers, and when we're working with the decorative thread and we're working with the beading foot, we want to make sure that our cutting blade is down, but with the elasticator foot, it isn't necessary.
Okay.
So we can just simply start to serge, and as we serge, the stitching comes out of the back of the machine, completely covering the fish line. And again, depending upon how much texture you want on your trim would be determined of the weight of the fish line that you're going to be working with.
Now you can serge a little bit more, but we have 12 weight thread. So remember, the smaller the number, the heavier the thread, and you can just serge and serge and serge.
And you really don't have to hold it, because with that hole in the foot, you can just let it go, and it's going to serge all by itself.
Now you have also done this edge on a shawl.
Yes, absolutely, and it's a very elegant look, again, depending upon the type of thread that we're going to be working with.
Now to use this as we have done on this throw, we just looped it around an edge and then top stitched it down, and then you could purchase braid and cover it. A little bit easier than trying to include it in a seam. This is a little quick demonstration of how this would work. But all in all, with fishing line, 12 weight thread in the upper looper and lower looper, and all-purpose thread in the needle, and just serging over the fishing line, it's a braid that has great appeal and great whimsy. During this segment of Nancy's Corner, I have the opportunity to bring to you a stunning textile art project that comes to us from Canada. It's 120 feet long and 10 feet high. It's a tapestry that has representation from every nation of the world. I'd like you to welcome Esther Bryan, the originator of Quilt of Belonging.
Good morning.
Good morning, Esther. A quilt that's 120 feet long that has a block, 263 blocks representing every nation of the world, is a remarkable feat. And how did that, tell our viewers how the idea was born.
The idea was born in the early 90s. I'm an artist, a painter, drawer. But in the early 90s, my dad asked me to return to Slovakia, his country of birth, but he hadn't been back in 50 years and he'd left all his family behind and he wanted to go home when the Iron Curtain came down. And so he said, come with me, Esther, you're the oldest of 6 children, you'll understand, and you're an artist, you can speak about it. So I went back with him and it just turned my world upside down. My understanding of how we live, why we live the way we do, and especially of how the past informs who we are today. And the realization that you can't leave that past behind, even though you think you've closed that door, it molds. And if you don't have a past, then you actually don't have a present or a future. You've got to deal with it somewhere.
So the past that we all have are from our ancestors or for our country of origin. And you had the idea of this quilt to represent every culture, every nation of the world.
I wasn't so much concerned about ethnicity at the time. What I wanted to show is that we are all different, but God has a purpose for every human being. And we come in different sizes and shapes and abilities, and not only abilities, but our personalities. And there is something that is in each person that is important to humanity, and we need to recognize that. We each have something to learn from the other.
So you interviewed your neighbors in Canada who were from different countries, for example, the Central African quilt block.
Well, what we did is we decided if we were going to show what the scope of humanity was and teach that there's a place for all, we wanted to develop that compassion. And this was a way of doing it. We realized as of the January 1st of the year 2000, one of my volunteers went through all the immigration records in Canada, if you can imagine that job, and found out we had one person from every country of the world, at least, living in Canada. So we thought, well, this is a good way. Plus, we included every Inuit, First Nation, and Métis. And the trick was it took 6.5 years to win the trust and work with every one of those groups. And we said the quilt would not be shown until the family portrait was complete.
So some of your favorite blocks?
My favorite blocks come not as often because of the workmanship, but sometimes because of the powerful stories they tell. When I think of Rosalie and the Central African Republic block, for example, her block is made with butterfly wings.
Not your normal fabric.
Not your normal fabric, but fabric tells, or thread, and if we define fiber in a larger context, tells the story of humanity, our religion, our geography, our history, our gender. It defines our special moments and the time that we live in. You can tell by what we wear, who we are. So for her, that is an important story because butterflies molt in that country and then die, and she talks about it like snow falling to the ground. So the children make art with this. But her story is powerful because she was persecuted, and she went back to forgive the one who had done the damage to her. And he gave one of the last interviews, the dictator, before he died, to her, and she forgave him, and that spirit is what makes that block special.
There's an Iranian block I'd like to show our viewers.
Well, Iran is, we have certain ideas about who they are, and sometimes the media, we see people in an unfavorable light. But what makes the Iranian special is we found ourselves on our hands and knees examining Persian carpets and the history of it, the mathematics, the beautiful artistry that has been left behind in the soul of the people. And he chose some of those designs, Monir and his wife, to put in that block. But then they have the writing, and let me read it to you.
Sure.
The writing in it is from an Iranian poet, and he said, "He who is indifferent to the sufferings of others is a traitor to that which is truly human." And that's a very compassionate
Yes.
kind of saying, which is really what they live by. And it's not our perception of those people, but I learned much in working with them.
Well, Esther, you have put together all the 263 blocks into a book that if you can't see the quilt in its entirety, you can read about it, but seeing it in its entirety, you see the breadth and the depth of our world. It's very charming. Thank you for being our guest, and thank you for watching Sewing with Nancy. See you next time. Bye for now.
Thank you.
Nancy and Pam Massey have written a fully illustrated book entitled Magical Serger Techniques, which includes all the information from this two-part series. It's $14.99 plus shipping and handling. To order the book, call 800-336-8373 or visit our website at sewingwithNancy.com/2317. Order item number BK2317, Magical Serger Techniques, credit card orders only. To pay by check or money order, call the number on the screen for details. Visit Nancy's website at sewingwithnancy.com for more information on this program. Sewing with Nancy, TV's longest airing sewing and quilting program with Nancy Zieman, is made possible by Baby Lock, Madeira Threads, Koala Cabinets, Clover, Amazing Designs, and Classe Needles. Closed captioning funding provided by Rowenta. Sewing with Nancy is a co-production of Nancy Zieman Productions and Wisconsin Public Television.